I hope you are still there, my most esteemed viewer and listener. Welcome back to our channel. Remember that I am your usual anchor person, your usual instructor, Ogochukwu Onoha, and the channel is alfonsoderothschildtutorials. What is the channel all about, in case you are joining us for the first time? Call it an English language channel. We take a look at all aspects of the English language. Like we are doing today, we are taking a look at applied English. When I say applied English, I mean having learned English language, having got enough grasp of the language and how to communicate with it, to be able to apply this knowledge in other areas of life, like discussing or analyzing statistical issues derived from economics or one of the social sciences, or from the physical or natural sciences. That is what the channel is all about. Our discussion today will interest you if you are an intending IELTS candidate. By IELTS, I mean the International English Language Test System, an important examination which you need to sit for if you are from one of the third world countries like Nigeria, and you intend flying abroad to the European Union or to the Americas, or Australia or Canada to pursue higher education or to pursue a profession. IELTS certification is indispensable. In our previous video, we talked about how to analyze a statistical table from the Task 1 IELTS writing. The candidate is expected to analyze and write a report on a given statistical model, whether the model portrays some economic variables or an experiment involving certain scientific variables or natural variables. When you are able to write a report on this, you are of course applying English to other areas of life. That's what applied English implies. Today, without wasting more of our time, let us take a look at what we have here. A little knowledge of economics already equips you to identify the models you see on the board as pie charts. They are pie charts. And these two pie charts represent 2 years. The first, 1995. The second, 2005. The pie chart represents a comparison of energy production, a comparison of the different kinds of energy production in France in 2 years, 1995 and 2005. These 2 years cover a period of 10 years. But it is not the period that we are measuring. We are measuring the changes in the different kinds of energy produced, of course, from various energy sources, 5 energy sources in all. The comparison is on the difference between the energy production from these 5 sources in 1995 and energy production from the same 5 sources in 2005. It is the difference between these 2 years and not what happened between the 10-period gap that we are comparing in the pie charts. Let us take a look at the pie charts themselves. The space that you can see here represents the proportion for gas production measured in percentage, 29.63%. And the space that you can see here is the proportion for coal production in the same year, 1995, represented in percentage terms, 29.80%. And then there is the proportion for petroleum production, measuring 29.27%. And then nuclear energy, 6.40%. Then 40.90% represents other sources of energy. Other sources of energy. That's the energy production from these 5 sources in 1995. Then in the year 2000, we can see that gas production has fallen somewhat from 29.63, or has risen somewhat from 29.63% to 30.31%. And coal production has equally risen from 29.80% to 30.9%. Now, these are the major increases, gas and coal. But let's take a look at the other one. In 1995, nuclear energy production stood at 6.40%, and by 2005, it has experienced a 5% increase to 10.10%. In the same vein, other sources of energy also increased from 4.90% to 9.10%, a nearly 5% increase. However, we notice that petroleum production, rather than increase, has fallen drastically from 29.27% to 19.55%. So overall, we notice that gas and coal production accounted for more than half of energy production in 1995 and continued to do so in 2005. Now, other sources of energy, that is, other source of energy and nuclear energy increased dramatically from 4.90% for other sources and 6.40% for nuclear energy to roughly 10% increase in 2005, rising to 9.10%, that is other energy, and nuclear energy 10.10%. The only source of energy that did not experience a rise in its production within the period of Soviet was petroleum production. Rather than increase, petroleum production plummeted from 29.27% to 19.55%. Now that is the analysis. The analysis, if it is done very well, equips the candidates to do a report of such an analysis. Like I pointed out in our previous classes on statistical model analysis in the IELTS examination, this analysis requires a word count of 150, a word count of 150. Now, word count does not refer to the limit of words were written, but the minimum. That is, a candidate is expected not to write below 150 words. So 150 words is the minimum. So many candidates actually write up to 190 words, but it's advisable not to go beyond that. So the report may well end at 170, 175, 180, 185, and up to 190. So you can write above 150 words, but don't overflog it. But you are not expected to write below 150 words. Ideally, this report should be presented in 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph, usually called the intro, is a paraphrase of the prompt, of the report prompt. What do I mean by prompt? Sorry, the board didn't give us sufficient space, but I'm going to write this down. The prompt tells you what to do, and while writing the prompt, you repeat the caption. You say the heading of the statistical model that you are analyzing. Now let me give you an example of the prompt. This is the prompt. That is, the prompt tells the candidate what to be done with the statistical model. It says, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. These are the key points we noted. Summarize the information, that's the information contained above, by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. In other words, the report is a summary of the pie chart, but not the detailed report of it. And you make the summary by doing what? Selecting and reporting only the main features. The main features. That means all unnecessary details are to be ignored. And then make comparisons where it is relevant to do so. For instance, compared to 2005, nuclear energy production in 1999 was at a low, but it jumped dramatically to a high in 2005. That's a comparison. It is a comparison, for instance, if, as an analyst, you point out that in both years, gas and coal accounted for more than half of energy production in France, as compared to nuclear energy and other sources of energy, which accounted for below 15% of all energy production. you've made a fair comparison there. You've pointed out that in both years, gas and coal were the leading energy sources in France, and that other sources of energy and nuclear energy, while their production rate was a lot below that those of gas and coal, that they nevertheless experienced some increase within that period of 10 years, an increase of roughly 5%. Equipped with this information, we are now in a position to start our written report or our written analysis. The first paragraph we will call the intro. What does it look like? The first paragraph paraphrases our basic information on the pie chart. It tells us what the pie chart is studying, the scope of the pie chart. It is studying energy production in France, in what years, which 5 energy sources are involved, and what period or what percentage or what unit of value is used to measure the figures. So let us take a look of how the first paragraph should look. Sorry, we have a small board space. We're going to see what we can do about that. So this is the intro. It is called the intro. What does the intro do? It is quite brief. It talks about what the study is all about, the location of the study, in this case, France, what the study is surveying, that is a comparison of different energy production by five energy sources. And Energy sources are mentioned in bracket: gas, coal, petrol, nuclear, and other sources. In France, in 2 years, that is 1995 and 2005. Then the values are presented in percentage. That is, the units of value. The units of value are presented in percentage. This is very important, especially if the caption of the statistical model does not state the unit. For example, the caption here says comparison of energy production without saying whether the values are presented in pounds, in dollars, in gram, in ounces, or in percentage. And when this is the case, you, the writer, has to mention the units on the basis of which the values are measured as a part of your introduction. Now, having written the introduction, you should move to the next paragraph. That next paragraph is called the overview or the overall. It is a paragraph where you state what you can see in the statistical model at a glance. In other words, what have you discovered? Are the values rising or falling? Which of the values are really rising? Which of them are falling? Are there areas of similarities or areas of dissimilarities, comparisons, or contrasts that you can notice? You can state all of these in your second paragraph without quoting figures. So figures are not quoted in the second paragraph. Let us take a look at that paragraph. We'll just begin it here and wipe the part of the board, part of what you've written, in order to continue. So let's take a look at what we now have on the board, beginning from here. It says overall, coal and gas accounted for more than half of all energy production in the period under study, while other energy sources supplied the least energy. That is a kind of comparison. What we have done is an aggregate of values. It's a kind of comparison, stating the highest values, first as the highs, and then bringing together the low. It says overall, coal and gas accounted for more than half of all energy production in the period under study, while other energy sources supplied the least energy. Petrol, though next in importance after gas and coal, experienced a low at the end of the survey period. In this summarized analysis, we didn't mention nuclear energy. We left it out because it is an unnecessary detail after we have said that other sources of energy recorded the lowest production. Recorded the lowest production at the beginning of the study, while petrol came next after gas and coal. That means that nuclear energy is somewhere in between, and it is not necessary whether we mention it or not. So that is the second paragraph of our report. Now we get to the third paragraph. You can call the third paragraph the analysis paragraph. So this is invariably contains 4 paragraphs. The intro, the body paragraphs, that is the overall and analysis paragraph, and then what you may call the conclusion, the final paragraph. So we'll now move over to our third paragraph. All right, let us continue our analysis. Let's start from this point. This is the third paragraph. It says, in 1995, gas and coal production at 29.63% and 29.80% respectively accounted for over half of total energy production in France. You can verify that from the chart. Both coal and gas rose from 29.80% and 29.63% to 30.9% and 30.31% respectively. That is roughly 1% increase. In 2005, gas and coal production recorded a 1% rise to 30.31% and 30.9% respectively. That has already been indicated on the graph. The most significant increase occurred in nuclear energy and other sources of energy production, which climbed from 6.40% and 4.90% respectively in 1995 to roughly 5% increase, that is 10.10% and 9.10% in 2005. That is a kind of comparison between the 1% rise in gas and coal and the roughly 5% rise in the production of other sources of energy and nuclear energy. That is a kind of comparison. Then we are left with the final paragraph to conclude our analysis. Now I will wipe this part of the board so that we can take our final paragraph. So this paragraph on petrol, the only source of energy that didn't experience any kind of increase, but instead experienced a low. With that paragraph, we bring our written analysis to an end. It says petrol was the only energy source that did not record an increase. In 1995, petrol production stood at 29.27%, but as the survey ended in 2005, it had plummeted to 19.55%. Have you enjoyed our class today? I bet you have. If my surmise is correct, If my guess is correct, then share and like this video. Like this video, share it, and then subscribe to this channel so that you receive our lessons firsthand in your mailbox. If you have a question or a suggestion, an observation or a comment on how we can make our video or lessons better, please leave your comment in the comment section, or you can email me at alfonsoderothschildtutorials@gmail.com. You can also send me a WhatsApp post using the number 091-330-1790. I remain your humble instructor as I invite you to join us on our next class, where we'll still discuss another aspect of pie chart analysis. Thank you very much. I remain blessed.